Situated on the northeast coast of Australia, the Great Barrier Reef is home to a myriad of flora and fauna. Beautiful as it is, something sinister is going on, putting the whole ecosystem at risk.
We are killing our reefs.
Something definitely has to change.
Earlier this year, I read a news article about how climate change is damaging the reef. After reading this, I decided to research the topic and critically analyse the various viewpoints surrounding the issue. I found that many studies support the claim in the news article that anthropological carbon dioxide has a negative effect on the Great Barrier Reef. So Peter the tour guide has agreed to take us to Daydream Island, where we can go for a dive and check out the reef.
The Great Barrier Reef is a beautiful place. I've been running this tour boat business for nearly 20 years now. People are travelling all over the globe to see Australia's world-famous Great Barrier Reef. Over the last 20 years, I've noticed a lot of coral bleaching. I think scientists are saying it's happening because of climate change. We need to protect it for future generations to enjoy.
Peter is obviously passionate about the Great Barrier Reef, but his opinion has no scientific basis. The fact that his income relies on the reef may also drive any paranoia he has of its degradation. For a better understanding of what's really going on, I headed over to another part of the Great Barrier Reef to speak to marine biologist Dr. Selina Ward. Dr. Ward works for the University of Queensland and is renowned for her research involving the response of coral to ocean acidification.
Peter is right. Bleaching of coral is occurring on the reef. This is what bleached coral looks like. The whole Great Barrier Reef could potentially look like this in as little as 16 years.
But what causes bleaching?
Bleaching occurs when the coral gets too warm.
How does carbon dioxide come into it?
It will essentially raise the water temperature.
This shell looks a lot like one that Peter and I found on the reef earlier, only healthier.
CO2 or carbon dioxide lowers the pH level of the ocean, making it more acidic. This reduces the amount of calcium carbonate available for invertebrates such as coral and shellfish to build their structures. Excessive amount of CO2 is caused by human activity such as burning fossil fuels. The level of CO2 in the atmosphere was around 280 parts per million before industrial times and is now at an unprecedented height of 380 parts per million.
The information presented by Dr. Ward is based on extensive scientific research, but just like any resource sustainability issue, anthropological carbon dioxide can be debated. Here is Professor Bob Carter's take on the CO2 issue.
It's a straw man argument we've heard for 30 years. The argument is they have science on their side. We have dogma. 50 million years ago, there was 3 times the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere as there is now. How can that be without coal power plants, cars, fossil fuels? The climate of this planet goes in cycles. Remember that there is scientific facts on our side. It's important you hear it, and I don't know why more people aren't pointing them out.
Even if Professor Carter is correct and CO2 is not predominantly anthropological, it doesn't change the fact that it is having a negative effect. It is important to consider the principles of ecologically sustainable development, people, place and profit when dealing with an issue like this. Thousands of people's incomes rely on the Great Barrier Reef. It is part of Australia's national identity and has held spiritual and cultural importance for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for thousands of years. The reef itself is being destroyed. The coral reef will die off, leaving a barren environment, which will most likely be re-inhabited by soft, non-calcified algal reefs, which hold less biodiversity. The Great Barrier Reef provides over 63,000 jobs, and the tourism industry contributes $6 billion annually to the Australian economy, which could decrease rapidly if the coral reefs disappear. So from what we've learnt, human activities contribute lots of carbon dioxide into the Earth's atmosphere. This increases the temperature of the ocean, killing the algae and corals, making them bleach. The carbon dioxide in the ocean also lowers the pH of the water, making it more acidic. This inhibits coral and shellfish from obtaining enough calcium carbonate to form a solid structure, also destroying the reef. So if no reef and less biodiversity, the economy, society and environment involved will all suffer. This is the cradle-to-grave analysis of the issue. In Australia, the protection of the Great Barrier Reef is taken seriously. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Act of 1975 and Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority have been put in place to ensure the reef's well-being. The Great Barrier Reef is World Heritage listed. Compare this to other countries such as China, where lack of protection as well as unrestrained pollution and development has led to the loss of around 80% of its coral reefs in the past 30 years. Based on China's loss and Australia's preservation, it could be said that Australia's vigilance regarding coral reef conservation is more effective and successful. Releasing CO2 is an essential part of modern human lifestyle. The consequences, however, is the degradation of the natural environment. We must understand the trade-offs we are making here. It is up to us to decide whether we value the environment enough to sacrifice or at least limit the activities release carbon dioxide in order to save the environment. Possible solutions include considering renewable energy, walking or riding a bike to work instead of driving, or just using less energy on a daily basis. Whether or not all the scientific facts add up, we should choose to take the precautionary principle and attempt to mitigate carbon dioxide-provoked climate change before the Great Barrier Reef is destroyed and it is too late.